like? What was the climate like on campus before there was an AACRC? The answers center around what organizing looked like, building community. They talked about Black unity and getting students connected to each other. There was also the family dynamic, as Black faculty and staff were their mothers, fathers, uncles, big brothers, and big sisters who showed that tough love. There were also discussions around the purpose of UBA and the Black Program Board. So let's go ahead and pick this right back up and get started with the introductions of our esteemed panelists. However, I will only highlight what's pertinent to this conversation because, we have a wealth of brilliant panelists who have a lot on their resume. I want to introduce first one of tonight's moderators. It's Dr. Terry Hurdle, better known by her students as Miss Terry. She established many traditions within the AACRC. She served as a program coordinator in the center, and while there, she started the Greek stroll competition for Aquaba in 2002. Her work also increased the base participation by 50% in its first year of existence. Because she is known consistently for pouring into her students, I call her the super village keeper. Dr. Hurdle.
You're on mute, Dr. Hurdle. Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Harlan Jackson. In 1985, Harlan entered the University of Cincinnati School of Business and graduated in 1989 with a double major in marketing and finance and minor in African American studies. Harlan presently serves as the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Cost USA in the oil and gas industry.
Byron Starworth is CEO of Inclusion Building Solutions, Chair of the City of Cincinnati Planning Commission, and Vice President of Green Umbrella. Mr. Starworth was the Veteran Affairs Hometown Hero Recipient Award winner in 2016 and Leadership Cincinnati Class 38.
Next on the panel, and we all know this person, Dr. P. Eric Abercrombie, better known as Dr. E, or simply just Doc, is an immutable figure in the university's African-American community. Specifically noted for this discussion, Doc in the late 1980s was instrumental in helping the university to honor its longstanding promise to open a Black cultural center, even as it faced resistance from some students, faculty, as well as board members.
Dr. Bluzette Marshall attended UC from 1987 through 1992. She now serves as the Vice President for Equity, Inclusion, and Community Impact here at UC. As an involved student, Blue was a committed member of the Black Program Board, Buddy, which stands for Blacks United to Do the Do for You, RAP, better known as the Racial Awareness Program, UBA, which was the United Black Association, and was a Darwin T. Turner Scholar.
Brother William Harris is recognized as the first male program coordinator in the AACRC. He proudly holds the titles of Reverend, Father, and Husband, and has just recently completed his master's degree.
Dr. Tony Persigian, Provost and Professor Emeritus, currently serves as a trustee of the college. His UC career spanned 40 years and is highly appreciated for his stance and support of building a Black cultural center. He was paramount in the early works while serving on the feasibility study committee. Another important role was serving as the acting head of African American Studies.
Reggie Brazel earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from UNC's College Conservatory of Music and Broadcasting. He was a member of the UC track and field team. He served on the Black Program Board and was the editor of The Challenger, which was the UBA newsletter. He was elected president of the United Black Student Association that fought for the building of the African American Cultural and Research Center.
And finally, our first moderator of the evening is Dr. Stacy L. Downey. She attended UC from 1992 through 96 and from 2002 through 2005. As an active student, her moments to remember were protesting the BOT appointment, all of her spring break tours, serving on the Black Program Board, and working with the Black Men think tank. She worked in the center, has remained connected with the center, and still showed her love to the center kids by hosting the tour groups in Arkansas and Delaware. In her role with SALD here, she was known for keeping it real and keeping it right, or you won't get in trouble. And as I reflect back, as my supervisor, she said the same thing to me. So at least she's consistent with her center kids. And now, with any further ado, we're turning over to our first moderator of the evening, Dr. Stacy L. Downing.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Eric, for that introduction. Again, welcome back to those who joined us last Wednesday. I'm glad that you were able to come and join us tonight. We have some new faces that I see. Would love to start giving shout outs. Don't want to miss anyone. But I do see our president of 4A who is here, Mr. Koo Williams. So thank you for joining us. So as Mr. Wofford stated, last week we started to paint the picture of what life was like for Black students at UC prior to the Cultural Center. Again, if you get the opportunity, please go back and view that recording. It was great going down memory lane, getting a feel of what the campus was like, how students came together and created a community, again, before there ever was an AACRC. So it leads us to the main discussion tonight. And again, we have some heavy hitters on this panel. I'm glad that we're able to come together with these individuals who played an instrumental and vital role in the creation of the Culture Center. So the big question of the night, why did it get started? So what I would like to do is go from a student perspective, and then I'll go to our members who were staff and faculty during that time. So I'm going to leave that question to, I'm going to pass the baton to Brother Harlan. Why did the center get started?
So, yeah, that's a great question. I think, as with most things, the center got started because of a vision. And honestly, it was the vision of our faculty and leadership. So Dr. Eric Abercrombie very clearly started planting seeds in our minds as undergrad students. So it's when we went on the last spring break tour that I went on, we went to different schools and they had some African cultural research centers, and we talked to them and we kind of did some own research on ourselves, so on our own. And so the vision of that allowed us to start putting energy towards it and starting to get put some details around the painting of what that could look like. And then we came back very excited and very motivated about what could we do to really leave a legacy, something that would really be on campus, a home base, besides McDonald's in San Diego University Center, or the UVA office was only so big. And so that vision of really wanting to create a home base, because as an undergraduate student at UC, you didn't always necessarily feel like the entire university felt welcoming or felt at home. So we wanted to create a space that it was clearly defining, and it was very respectful, acknowledging the important contributions that African Americans and Africans across the diaspora has really contributed overall, but especially at the University of Cincinnati. There's a rich legacy of African Americans at UC that really wasn't captured anywhere, wasn't housed anywhere. And I think we want to create a home for current students and for that legacy to really live ongoingly.
Thank you. So again, we heard some key things: planting of seeds. We know Doc was good for that whenever you attended UC, and legacy. So Mr. Brother Reggie, what was your perspective and your thoughts on why the center got started?
Well, there was also, and Harlan put it, very, very eloquently, but there was also some issues on campus in terms of there was at one point white fraternity had an incident where I believe they said something negative about Martin Luther King. There was a letter found in a dormitory to an African-American student. I myself was stopped by the police along with two other people who happened to have on trench coats. And so there was just an atmosphere on the other side, like Harlan said, that we weren't as felt as home. And then, you know, the students got together and began to say, hey, we do pay into the general fee. And that was one of the discussions that the students came up with. And the students started to feel like, hey, if we're paying into this general fee, and what is here that represents us? We wanted to institutionalize the heritage and culture that we had at the school.
Awesome. So, and again, from your perspective, Dr. Marshall, you began talking about being a Black female student last week. What role or why, from your perspective, did you feel like the Culture Center got started?
Well, I believe that it got started because we really needed a place to put our footprint on campus. We were, as I said, at TUC, I mean, that kind of was the first cultural center, so to speak. It just didn't have the words African American emblazoned on the building. I think that there was also a need for us to have more space. You know, we spent time either outside of McDonald's or in ethnic programs and services. And I mean, you're probably talking about maybe a 20 by 20. So really being able to have the space to gather, but also the space to really mentor, to support, to do research, to help each other with schoolwork, and also to help build out programming for the student body. I think those were some of the foundational reasons why the center was started, in addition to being able to see centers that were already in existence at other schools, and then coming back saying, you know what, we could do this too. We need to have this on our campus.
Awesome. And again, some of the words you said resonated with me when you talked about TUC, McDonald's, you know, that was a hot spot, the bridge, you know, hanging out in EPS. So again, those places still resonate, and we can reminisce about what those places meant. So again, even prior to the Culture Center, I can only imagine what those places for hanging out, strategizing felt like. So again, we're getting a picture of why the center was started. Now we're at the point where we want to put it into reality. So we know it takes many people, a lot of support to make that happen. Again, we have Dr. Przigian and Dr. Abercrombie on this Zoom. So I would love to hear from their perspective, why they thought it got started and what roles they play in bringing it to reality. So I'll start with Dr. Przigian and then we'll go to Dr. Abercrombie.
Thank you, Stacy. It's an honor and privilege to participate in panel discussion tonight. And I want to just quickly reflect on my 40 years at UC, and I'm trying to think of another example of where a student-driven student initiative accomplished so much, so fast, with sustained value as the efforts by UVA students in the middle, late 80s, early 90s, work, vision, leadership that led to the establishment of the African American Cultural and Research Center. As I reflect on my role, I was enlisted to chair the feasibility committee, but I'll back up just a moment though. That was just one little step preceded by many important steps. And I'm glad you started tonight with acknowledging the role of student leadership, student vision, because in almost breathtaking speed by university standards, things unfolded in 1989, 1990, and 1991, truly breathtaking. I know Harlan was in that spring break trip, and I know a flame was lit at Vanderbilt University when you guys saw the Culture Center there. And that was spring of '89. By spring of 1990, it's amazing that UAB had submitted a proposal and lobbied to the Board of Trustees and the President. And the concept of a center was endorsed a year after that spring break trip in 1989. By university chronology, that's breathtaking. Successful in getting the board support. And I think we have to acknowledge that we were also darn lucky that Dr. Odell Owens was on the board. And he was instrumental in terms of our getting political support. And at the same time, he was instrumental in supporting the research behind the center, his very famous and generous contribution of $10,000 to support our work. In spring and fall of 1990, the feasibility committee worked, and by November 20th of 1990, we submitted a report. And by January of 1991, the Board of Trustees was given that report, and they acted on it and approved the implementation of the center. I'd only like to underscore at this point that the committee did its homework. I'm very proud of that effort. I was honored to chair that committee. But I would only underscore that we really did our due diligence and came up with a compelling case, feasibility case for the center. Through the generosity of Dr. Owens, we were able to visit numerous centers, including Purdue, Penn State, Ohio State, Rutgers, Miami, Colgate, and Yale. And without the aid of the internet, we were able to research 50 other centers. So we had one heck of a database, facts, comparisons, data, solid research, and it was very clear after all that work that UC was way behind its peer institutions, and it was time to correct that deficiency. So all of that research went into a very compelling case for the center, underscoring the feasibility for the center. This was the right time for UC to move in this direction, especially given the climate on campus in the 1980s, where a great many of African-American students felt undervalued, if not unvalued, and it was time for UC to step up to the plate. Thank you.
That
All
was
right, Donnie, everybody.
for a
Dr.
moment, Doc, just one quick
Okay.
moment, just
All
one
right.
quick moment. I just want to underline or put bold around what you said. In your 40-year history at UC, as you're reflecting, thinking about what student movement looks like, student activism and sustainability. So I hope that resonates with the viewers, the audience, that his perspective from 40 years ago and where we are today, just that sustainability and why we're here today celebrating.
Stacey, nothing comes close to that effort, and look at it. It's still going 29 years later.
Yes, yes. All right, Doc, you ready? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. First of all, I want to say it's good to see everybody, you know, even the people I can't see. And let me just kind of fill in, you know, the questions around why the center. Ever since Black students hit the yard at the University of Cincinnati, there's two things people have asked, there's two things that have been apparent. One, students have said, we don't feel welcome. The other thing, students have said, we need a gathering place. So when you ask, why does the center come about? These are two of the things, but let me go back. The other reason it happens is because when our forefathers and foremothers and our ancestors speak and ask for something, it may not come right away, but it does eventually come. So this issue of a cultural center was raised in the late 60s when Black students asked about the cultural center being established and were told, hell no, there will never be a Black cultural center at the University of Cincinnati. So when we talk about the history, and I just want to fill in 1988, when we were on spring break tour, the other thing that happens is, why the center? It's time. And now we have the leadership. We have some of the most outstanding students that you can find on any campus. So we go on spring break tour, stop at Vanderbilt. That whole tour dealt with Harlan, Reggie, different people saying, hey, we want a cultural center. So right away, I think what happens is when students speak, administrators have to listen. So I want to say this. I take no credit for the starting or establishment of the center. The great thing is it was on the part of students. I want to go back to something Dr. Pasinian said and take my brother Reggie Brazel back. Reggie was asked to go with Black Student Union to go see Dr. Odell Owens. Reggie goes, and in Reggie's style, he turns Dr. Owens off. Reggie comes to me and says, look, Doc, he said no. I said, look, go back, be a little more gentle. Let's see if we can seal the deal. Reg goes back, becomes more gentle. Next thing, Dr. Owens is saying, I'm going to support the center. Here's $10,000. That's how that piece started. I also want to say, in terms of the center, the SAE situation, there's some historical situations. The SAE, Martin Luther King Trash Party, put UC on international notice that it wasn't happening and that oppression and white supremacy was deep on the campus. So what Harlan them did is they went and they wrote really good proposal. They found information, and I want to end with this because I could talk all night. What was important about the center was there were allies. So as the students, not only was it the Black Student Union saying, we want this center, they connected with student government, they connected with white administrators. So as we go back into the 80s, the reality of what happens in the 80s, we really find this issue of diversity, allyship being very important. So those are things I would add. The other thing I would say is I want to add this. The only person not with us tonight is Tracy Slater, unless she's in the room. Tracy Slater actually was the president who took us into the center. So I did want to call her name.
Right. And I need to throw in something real quick because we got students on here, and I'm very compassionate about students. I was mentored for leadership by Harlan and Doc, but Harlan made sure to let them know, because I'm from the west side of Dayton, and so he needed that west side of Dayton, that street, to come out. Just like we needed these protests, there's times in the struggle where you need intelligentsia, and then there's times in the struggle where you need fire. And the individuals, the students, we created an atmosphere of fire where the university had no choice but to answer. Now, they could have said no, and we had already developed plans. There was a Rosa Parks plan, there was a Martin plan, and there was a Malcolm plan. And fortunately, we never had to go to the Malcolm plan because students were committed to making a change. And every weekend we did something. We knew that hall where the founder said there would never be blacks. So I painted my face red, black, and green, and about 200 students, and we marched. And when we got into that building, what's the name of the building? I forgot. Where they said there would never be a black student.
McMicken Hall.
Right, and we stomped on McMicken, and the papers were there, and they were writing. So every weekend we were writing to the paper and doing these sorts of things to let folks know where the president, Stager, had to come out and officially say the biggest problem on the campus was racism. And when he said that, then we knew that we had created a fire on campus by a host of activities. And so the students stayed up at night, we read together, we ate together, we did a whole lot. It took a whole lot, and I'm certain my GPA went down from a 3.0 to like a 2.3. But that was the commitment, because I had to study every, you know what I'm saying?
Your GPA went down, Ray.
It did. But that's the sacrifice that you had to make, because certain students, you know, I wasn't gifted in that arena. I had to be there studying 24/7 to keep it up. So I just want to let the students know that the fire they just put on this nation through protest is the same type of fire that we put on to create an atmosphere where we could get a yes when we finally sent them a proposal.
One other thing, I think everybody will agree, the 80s were the time of the height of Black consciousness. Everybody was trying to be Blacker than everybody else, organizations, individuals. You know, the stage was set for the Cultural Center in terms of where we wanted to go. As Blue mentioned, technically the Office of Minority Affairs, which some of you know as Ethnic Programs and Services, really was our first cultural center. No, that wasn't our first one. The Bridge was our first one, as people go back. So the point I want to make, as Black people, we've always tried to find a place to come together. I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna be quiet. The other problem was we had friction among Black student organizations. Remember, Will? We had friction between Greek letter organizations. We had friction, GDIs and other people. So we needed a place to come into where we could take care of our own business. And TUC was not that place. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay, we all know when Doc's voice gets elevated, he is ready to go in. I feel like we're going to get some scholarships, have an offering or something when we end this program. So again, there was a couple of key points that were made from individuals, and we talked about allies, you know, how important it was to have people who supported the movement, this process that didn't look like us. So again, we talked about that. We have Dr. Przigian, you know, Brother Reggie had to, you know, go a little soft, do some things a little differently to get different allies to be a part of the process and to be supportive. So again, we're talking about support. There are many individuals who, again, played a role. So I just want to touch Byron. I saw him, heard him earlier. What was your role? And I want to ask Brother Will that same question. What was your role during this time as well?
I had a couple of roles. One, under the leadership of Harlan Jackson's administration and Reggie's administration, I ran a program at Marion Middle School that helped prepare me to be president of the UVA, where we took some students. Reggie said, I need you to go over to this middle school that's really close and take some brothers over there. Eventually, we included some sisters from the university to go. But we had famous people come through that were coming to speak at the university. Reggie insisted that the university have folks like Shirley Chisholm, Lionel Richie, Reverend Jackson, go over to the school. So I got to meet some of these people and take them over to Marion Middle School, and then I became president. Dr. Przigian talked about the check from Odell Owens. I happened to be in some of these meetings where Dr. Owens professed that he was going to make a commitment. He stroked a check for $10,000. For me, that was monumental to see a Black man just pull out a checkbook and write a check for $10,000. So as incoming president of the UVA, I traveled to those 6 universities that Dr. Przigian mentioned. There are many other students within the UVA that went to other schools, but those 6 I went to, many of those trips were with Dr. Abercrombie. And I have to say, outside of my father, I never spent that many hours just sculling. So many people on this video chat probably have had one-on-one conversations with Dr. Abercrombie, but he was having a young child at that time. He was going through some physical stuff, and he went there with me like no other man besides my father. And so my respect for him as a human being, as a mentor, grew. We went to Colgate and to Harvard and Yale. These are just trips with me and Dr. Abercrombie. It wasn't a spring break tour. And from that research, I was blessed with the opportunity to make the formal request. After this is the actual copy of our feasibility study, to Dr. Steger and the rest of the Board of Trustees. That's the role I played. I have to say that Reggie's style leadership was different than mine. We didn't see eye to eye all the time, but he knew that there had to be somebody a little different than him to carry this across. And we've had words 20 years later talking about the difference and our respect for each other. Because I wasn't walking around in a dashiki and an ankh and all that. I had a suit on. You know, I love you, Reg. I had a suit on every time I went to talk with Dr. Steger and Dr. Baker and Dr. Wagner, which all three of us as presidents had to do that. But, you know, I had a suit and a tie on every time I went to make these presentations. And we were coached by Mel Posey, Dr. Mel Posey, Ken Simonson. I'm going to evoke the names because, you know, you don't want to be underground and have somebody honor you. You want your flowers now. And then this is, if we have young students on the video chat right now, you need to know that it takes all kind of us to make something huge happen. And so I was there for the ribbon cutting when they authorized the money to redo the existing building. It was all that's left of Sanders because the building came down. We haven't talked about that. And they left a little corner of that building and that became the cultural center. So I was there for the presentation to the Board of Trustees when they approved the money. And then I was blessed to be there for the ribbon cutting and turned the administration over to Tracy Slater, who now Tracy Slater Rigaud, with $25,000 in the bank was our budget. Unbelievable to even evoke that because I went back many years ago to talk to some student leaders who asked me to come back and say, what was it like to be president of UVA? And the money had diminished. And then the last role I played after being president of UVA, I was president of SACUB, and Reggie talked about this a little bit. Our general fee was under siege and we felt like we needed control of our money. And so my last year of school, I was president of SACUB, and students, undergraduate and graduate students together worked together. And we got control of $21 million for our own programming. So that's the role I played. It took a team effort. There's not one person that made this thing happen. And, you know, I feel like today I can go talk to a CEO about funding a project that I'm hunting because I learned how to effectively project myself and a vision by working with some student leaders 30 years ago. It all started there. So Stacey, thank you for having me on and asking me that question. So.
And we appreciate you, Byron, you and your suit. You know, again, everyone did need to have on a dashiki. So your approach, your suit, your mannerism was well needed and it was valuable and you made a tremendous contribution. Brother Will?
Off mute. There I go. So, you know, like I was saying last week before I was so rudely interrupted, you know, I was kind of the big brother of the crew. I got to UC a few years before everybody. And I just decided that I was just going to be a student forever. And so all these individuals telling all these stories, I was there. I think you know, I didn't necessarily have an official role in all the different administrations, but I guess one role that I kind of feel like I served in was like a minister of information. You know, I was majoring in African-American studies, so anything that had to do with Black people, for Black people, about Black people, I was on it. And so, right, Doc, I appreciate you bringing up the fact that after you all came back from the spring break tour and Harlan, everybody was talking about spring break tour and we started talking about it, you know, then we again uncovered information that in 1968, under Tyrone Yates and his administration of UBA, they had wrote a proposal to the university.
Dwight Tillery.
Dwight Tillery, excuse me, Dwight Tillery. That's right, Dwight Tillery. Yeah, they said no to the Cultural Center, but they said yes to Black Studies. And so, you know, in 1971, 72 academic year, the Black Studies program came on the scene. So, you know, again, it was beautiful to watch. Didn't really know or how to really explain it because, you know, you had brothers and sisters, you know, embracing different philosophies, you know, like me and Reg, I kind of leaned towards Reg because I was kind of like the radical brother, you know, Black Panther Party, you know, if they don't do what they need to do, let's burn this sucker down kind of mentality. And then we had Harlan, and we had, you know, Byron and others who were more diplomatic. And, you know, and I admire them to this very day, their diplomacy and their ability to go and sit at the table and have the conversation. I was too much of a hothead. I was too radical, you know, maybe too conscious, you know, and too impatient, you know, knowing that the university had an opportunity to do the right thing many, many years before I got there, and didn't do what they should have done, didn't do enough to the SAEs and the Martin Luther King trash party, didn't do enough or tried to be sneaky, you know, with the $26 million, you know, invested in South Africa. You know, we discovered that. So, you know, again, my role was big brother. I look at all the people that, you know, names, I don't see faces, but I see names. And, you know, I was there when they started doing all the feasibility work. By that time, you know, it was like, dude, you're a little old. It's time for you to try to get a job. So I wasn't involved in all of the feasibility study and that research. I was working with Mary Ellen Ashley, who was the vice president of vice president of student affairs, and Linda Bates Parker. But I remember that day when Doc invited me to become the program coordinator of the Culture Center, you know, on a temporary basis that first year in 1991, and changed my life forever. That was the beginning of my professional development as a student affairs practitioner. And as I said to you all last week in our follow-up conversation, I use a lot of the things that we did on the yard that I'm now doing in my role as a school counselor at Walnut Hills High School. So my life will always remember the Culture Center, Doc, and everything we've done through this work.
So, and again, I appreciate those sentiments and words, and what resonated again for me when Byron, you brought out that feasibility study. For a person to still have that, so again,
I got more. This is Fade to Black Caucus. I have a throw. Prescott's King.
Oh, you have.
I got it all. Come on now.
You went into the archives. We might have to come to your house.
Yeah, I have 3 copies of the Crescent Report that didn't get wet when the water came back in the basement somewhere. So
How awesome is that, securing and keeping that history? So again, we are to the point where the Board of Trustees came in and said, yes, we approve this Culture Center. So give us a picture now of once that approval came into place. Doc, you talked about the social consciousness of Black people. We trying to be more Black than Black in the late 80s going into the 90s. How was the climate on campus, especially from a student perspective? And then I want to get to Dr. Perzigian and Doc. From a student perspective, when the campus heard that the University of Cincinnati has the audacity to build a Black Cultural Center, what was the social climate like once that came into fruition? So I'm going to start with Harlan. Again, this is a student perspective, and then I want Blue to go after him.
Well, I'm going to share briefly and pass it on, because during this timeline, right, that 89 spring break tour, when we put the initial draft kind of proposal together, right, after that I was a senior and I was gone off of campus from them. So I was still in touch with folks, but to be clear, the torch had been passed. And so one of the things I hope people really take away with, you've heard from, because I had a 2-year tenure at UBA in the presidency, which was a big spark, but it was a lot of leaders that helped enable this. But from me, then to Reggie, then to Byron, and then to Tracy Slater, right, there was a lot of years. So I was gone off campus by that time. But what I think is so critical is the strategy that people are hearing in place and the succession planning, particularly as students, right? Because administrators know they can wait you out. Right, you give folks you need, after your freshman year, you don't know what you're doing anyhow. Maybe your sophomore year, you might decide to do something. Then you got 2 years left and you're out. they can wait you out. So the succession planning, I was gone. I helped us, helped get it initiated in terms of the initial kind of draft, but all the leaders that are here before me can talk more about what transcended afterwards, because I honestly was off campus. I've been able to come back on different occasions, but there's some other folks who can give you more of the heartbeat and the actual responses to those dynamics.
Right, and I want to follow up from Harlan briefly, because I know we're moving forward real quick, but once Harlan passed the baton, Doc opened the door when he allowed me to speak to the freshman orientation. So the UVA president always spoke at the freshman orientation. Yeah. And so really that was the key, because what I did, and it was from different ideas of the membership, and I submitted my will to the membership. When I wanted to go to meetings in dashiki, they said, no, you're wearing a suit. So I had to listen to what the members told me of UVA, the executive board. And so when we talked to those freshmen, that first meeting, I had the dashiki on, we had brothers and sisters dressed as Black Panthers, and we addressed the students and told them that this was going to be the campaign and this was what was going to be expected. So the freshmen came in, and then we had presidents of the Deltas, the Zetas, Alphas, all the different student organizations. Also, we were able to bring on board. And so we went and met with, there was a very strategic process. The noise that we made, the radicalism, was just a part of a strategy outwardly. But we had to meet with the president of each group and get them to come on board. And once we got the Zeta signature, and we got the Sigmas and the Deltas and the different organizations that were in the student dorms, then we had a collective united front that we could move forward from. The students wrote a proposal before the feasibility study even came. So I just want to make sure that, again, because we got students, and to let students know, there was always some hate against Dr. Abercrombie because they thought Doc could do more. But we don't understand, it's not for the staff and faculty to do more, it's for the students who have no risk. Doc and Black faculty have jobs, and there's only so much they can do when the students are very active and can push them further. So again, I want to keep the impetus on what the students can do so they can do it in the future. Whatever we've done is just that not to glorify what we've done, but this is a strategy that you all can use for whatever it is that your mission is on campus.
Thanks, Reggie, for taking us back a little bit and adding to that student activism piece. So now, Dr. Marshall, again, many of you might have graduated during this time before the center officially opened. But again, as it's being built brick by brick, digging in the ground, what was that social climate like on campus from your perspective?
So social climate depended on the group that you were with. Really, with my perspective, it was great. It was a time of celebration. It was a time of excitement. It was a time of almost being close to exhale, because you were going to have a sense of place with brick and mortar. For other folks, it was, why do they need that on campus? They're just going to mess up the yard, so to speak. You still had some Black people who were resistant to having a Black Cultural Center on campus. And so it depended on where you were relative to what the sentiment was for the day, so to speak. I will say though, during that particular time, that was the height of organization for our Black students who were working with the Cultural Center. Now we talk about this Co-op 2.0. I can tell you without a doubt that we had Co-op 2.0 back then when we were getting the center ready. Looking at what the students' majors were, they were serving on different committees where they could utilize their book knowledge and put it into practice. So we had kind of like the finance committees, the different operation committees, just kind of the building committees, looking at the facilities and the design. And the students who were a part of the different committees for the cultural center were relying not only on just their general knowledge and their passion, but they were also pulling that theory that the professors had taught in class and really putting that into practice. So it was a really dynamic time period when the Cultural Center was coming into existence.
And so I think what's interesting about that now, me being in a role as a senior leader, administrator on a college campus. So from Dr. Perzigian and Dr. Abercrombie, again, you all will hear things the students will never hear. So again, can you provide any insight from your perspective, what you were hearing, those who were opposing things that were coming in? Again, those are the things you couldn't share at the time. The students probably had no clue what's happening in the background, those fights that you were in explaining. So can you give a perspective from being a staff, faculty person, supporting this initiative, the things that you all were dealing with as the center was being built? You're on mute. There you go.
Unmute. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, we're good. I'm sorry. In terms of a context, I don't think we've heard about tonight. It was alluded to, but in terms of the faculty culture, the university culture, I don't think we can completely separate it from the global culture. And while all of this is playing out in terms of a feasibility study and UAB lobbying, et cetera, the world was now becoming increasingly alarmed and objecting to apartheid. So I think in the back of everyone's mind was the horrors of apartheid, and anything that would smack of racism or discrimination, I think was a growing consciousness, not perfectly, not 100%, but a growing consciousness on the campus as a whole. As the 1990s unfolded, I think there was a growing awareness now, is the university prepared for the 21st century? Is the university positioning itself to meet the inescapable, unavoidable demographic changes taking place? And how is that going to reflect on the university and the student body that will form at the University of Cincinnati? So I think as the center unfolded, I think more and more faculty, more and more administrators were beginning to make connections that this center could support the larger agenda of recruiting more students, retaining more students, promoting an environment that was free of discrimination, building trust and respect among African-American students and the larger student body, and the university's commitment now to fostering a supportive, caring ambiance for all of its students. So there were some cultural contexts that I just commented on that I think were congruent with the center, and the center was the perfect vehicle to realize some of our broader objectives in terms of combating racism and promoting cultural diversity.
I think what's important is for you all to understand, you know, my whole time at UC pretty much until I started getting gray hair is I really wasn't trusted. I mean, the white professors and staff, and even some black, they always wondered what I was about. So I look at Brother Will here and say, I always have my go-to students. And I would never let people have a sense that Harlan, Byron, and Reggie, and that students did not have the ability to carry on what they wanted. So let me go to some other names, since this is going to be a history night that we need to call. The major person I had to influence was Dr. Tom Wagner. He was the vice president of student affairs. Let me be honest. If Dr. Wagner had said no in any of these junctures, let me start with it. Board of Trustees could have said no. Dr. Owens did it first. He said, no, hey, if it's not multicultural, I'm not supporting it. All right. We were able to Brother Reg went back, we were able to get that vote. President, bottom line, once he saw the board was on, I'm good. So then it moves on, student organizations like student government. I want to say this. The most important vote, maybe you'll remember this, Reggie, was Faculty Senate. The Faculty Senate was the last group. And I told Reg, I said, look, now we got to go in. We got to deliver this. You got to be cool. And the Faculty Senate was the last vote. And they ended up saying, based on Reggie's presentation and others, if this is how bad student life is for Black students at UC, we got to try something. Remember, the impetus for this is the SAE situation. That is really what gave us what we needed. So when you kind of look at how things unfolded, this man right here, Dr. Persignon, that's why I'm so glad he could be on this call tonight, because he was the one talking all the big wigs. I mean, he's the one that really people was pulling him aside. They wasn't pulling me aside because they know what they was going to hear. The other name I got to call is Stan Chesley. Stan Chesley, who was the board chair at the time where the Culture Center comes in. I got to share this with you all. At the point where the board is decided, the Culture Center is going to happen, I'm up in the administration building. Stan Chesley's there, probably the president, and he makes a call to the Cultural Center because he wanted to know, was it open? And the first two words he heard was Habari Ghani. Stan Chesley went to tears. This Cultural Center meant that much to him to become established. So people that, you know, they know the history. So I just wanted to share that, you know, my role was really very, very smooth. And I want to go back to the document and I'm finished because I need to say this. The feasibility, our group, Byron and Tony, we bottom line ended up setting the stage for the Culture Center to be open, if y'all remember, by, okay, the Faculty Senate, like in about April of 91,
right.
They gave the vote. The Board of Trustees said we want it open by the time school starts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's another document that deals with what we really wanted. Mm-hmm. And what was in that document asked for a freestanding cultural center. Mm-hmm. So I just want to give y'all the total history that some of what was asked for really, okay, I'll say it this way because I'm gone, has not been delivered yet.
Yes,
but again, to give you kind of the history and the platform of how things happen. Yeah.
So
Doc, can I add something on this one?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Downey.
Go ahead.
And correct my memory if I'm mistaken, but as we were looking for space, did not Frank Bowen give up the space for us to have the cultural center, the place where it is?
Yes, mm-hmm. Because
he was over auxiliary services at the time.
Yeah, because y'all remember the old Tanner building? Y'all remember that old building across from, we like, hell, no, that ain't gonna work. Right. So we couldn't find the space. So you're exactly right. The other thing, and maybe you're gonna ask this later, but let me say this. I didn't want to become director. In our proposal, we suggested several different areas that should be over the Cultural Center. Mm-hmm. My vote was for Africa, well, at that time, Black Studies. Right, but they didn't want it at that time. Right. The leadership of the Black Studies department didn't want it. So Dr. Wagner, I already had a job, right? I mean, I'm cool. YM up in Minority Program Services. Reggie already told you, I'm caught in between. Black folk question me, white folks question me. I'm tired. Have my career. So in reality, you're exactly right, Blue, but that's how I became director. Dr. Thomas Wagner was very important in the establishment of the center because he was the administrator who had to convince the president and others that this was the move to make because people thought the cultural center would make the campus more segregated.
and let me throw in a little piece of history real quick. We keep saying Dr. Owens said no. Students, when you meet with professors or people in powerful positions who sit on the board, Dr. Owens invited us to his house. I think we had dinner over there. He had told us what the plan was and how to respond. He told us that he would say no in the beginning. He told us that was the strategy, because if the African American man on the board says no, then that gets the rest of the members of the board to say, and then when he changes his mind, then he could sway them more. So everything we did was a strategy, and he taught us how to strategize and work with African American professionals in those positions. Some of you all will be maybe needing Blue to do something in her position, and you have to be mindful about strategy. And there's some things that from her position or Dr. Downing, they can do, and you have to be okay with what we can do. We initially wanted the center to be off campus where we could control it more. We knew once we gave it over to the university, it was no longer ours per se. And that's a part of the struggle, that you're never going to get everything you want. And so you have to be willing in this struggle to end oppression, to compromise and find victories, and then be able to move on. And so the Cultural Center being at the university was a victory. And if it had been on its own, we would not have found funders to continue the funding of it. It probably wouldn't be around today. So
and to I think Doc and Reggie, I think you hit on the next question, right? And first of all, just a quick break. His name was mentioned earlier. I see him on the screen, Mr. Simonson. You all gave him kudos earlier. He has joined. Hey, Mr. Simonson. So again, you two have touched on the next question. The compromise, things you wanted in the center, right? You wanted silver, gold, you wanted everything. So again, what did you all ask for that you didn't get? And were you happy with that final decision? So I'll go to Byron on this one.
Yeah, you teed it up perfectly.
Okay, you was ready.
I've been begging. I've been trying to get my family to get the dog quiet. So it was about research. And so in Tony's office, he broke it down for me from a provost perspective, what we were asking for. And he said, if you call this thing research, then publications have to come out of it. Doctoral candidates have to be writing. And if you cannot do that, if you can't get African American studies producing books and research papers out of the center, then you don't need to be calling it research. I'm telling you this as a provost, and that's my job. And so we still asked for that because we knew the African American Studies Department did not have that many professors, and quite frankly, there weren't that many African American professors on campus, and they still don't have enough. And so we continued to ask for research. The resource came later under another administration, but we asked for research. We did not let up on that. So great question. I'm sure others will want to step on that a little more. Even Dr. Przigian and Dr. Avram could talk about the pressures of produce or perish and how you lose your job, even if you're tenured, if you don't put something out on the street. But that was from a leadership role. I had to share that with my administration because it was real.
And thank you. And we will, I think everyone put that pin in it, why that name change. And again, we'll probably pass that baton to Doc and Dr. Przigian. Any others want to share about the things that you all desired and was planning for and hoping for that didn't happen? I heard a freestanding building, we was connected to the Alley Cat, right? So again, I don't know what the name was before 92, but what other things that you all requested that you didn't get?
It wasn't a library. One of the things I think, Byron, it's interesting, man, remembering that Colgate trip, man, when you mentioned it tonight. But one of the things the students asked for was a library, which would have been consistent with the whole idea of doing research. But everybody here realizes how small that space was, and bottom line, what the budget was. So if I can say it now, one of the reasons that the name changed was because we could not deliver the research part, and with budgets being cut every year, we couldn't do our programs. So it was a matter of which one was going to be most important. And so that, I mean, we hated to make that change, but we had to make that change due to, like I say, the fact that our money was being cut, and we just couldn't deliver that research arm. That's why to this day, I really wish the Black Studies Department had been the group that had taken it over. But again, that wasn't something desired. So we moved on the way we did.
Dr. Abercrombie, to step on that a little more, I think the time I was proudest of being from the University of Cincinnati was our trip to Yale. And I realized that I could hang with somebody from an Ivy League school, later went on to study at Dartmouth. But nonetheless, Alexander Haig, for some of us who are over 50 years old, had donated the money for the library at the African American Cultural Center at Yale. So there are wealthy people investing in cultural centers all over the country. I remember going to the Paul Robeson Center at Rutgers on that trip too. And it had a library in it. So the library, if we start talking about raising more money for the center, we've got expanded space now in the center. It might be time for some of us who have additional cash on hand to try to make that become a reality. But we definitely got to get the African American Studies Department on board.
Right, but the students, when we developed it, when we thought about it, the research part was not from a Eurocentric scholarly mindset. That's not what we were thinking about from the conversations that I recall. The conversations that we were talking about in terms of research was an Afrocentric kind of perspective, not based on Eurocentric scholarly canons of research. We wanted individuals to come in who were Afrocentrists. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing would come and give a speech, or come to the center and do her thing. We could have Hakeem Madhubuti come in. We would have Karinga come in. We would have someone from maybe talk about the Black Panther Party come in to the center where students could come and gather information. We didn't really take into consideration, I don't think, in my opinion, the fact that we were housed, we thought beyond the university. We thought that just like you could have individuals from the surrounding community come in and touch base. I don't know that Doc brought, but remember we had Chuck D come to the to the cultural center, and he spoke to the students, and so that was really what we kind of imagined when we thought about research. But not in terms of the Eurocentric scholarly type of canon of information.
Oh, I just received this from Byron. So this is some of the original documentation. I don't know how to make it bigger, but of what was asked for. I mean, Byron, the man, you've got some good information here. So again, here is some of the things that they were requesting. Again, the staff support, the reading room, and maybe that's what Doc was talking about. So again, here were some of the original asks for the culture center. So again, just wanted to give you all this snapshot, whether you can see it or not. But again, appreciate you for sharing that document, and then again, just kind of seeing what was asked for and did we get it.
So, hey, Stacy. So,
Mhm.
yeah, you know, one of the things that you saw on there, and this is something that Doc and I, we've, you know how Doc will call you in the middle of the night.
Yes, Jesus.
Yes. So we would always, we would talk about, the having that hall, having a lecture hall
Right.
that would have been part of the cultural center for us to be able to do programming internally. But one thing about us, and I think the students need to know this, we were perfect. We were experts at taking lemons and making lemonade. So that's one of the reasons why when you look at the cultural center and you look at the room and that room being open, we were able, although we didn't get what we was hoping to get, we got what we got, and we used the room in very creative ways where we were able to set it up for lectures. We were able to set it up for dinners and banquets. When I was at, there at the center was the most requested facility for use by any location on the yard. We had the largest living room in Southwest Ohio. When you opened up those curtains and you got that beautiful view, everybody wanted to come into the cultural center. We had to start blocking off times specifically for the groups that the cultural center was actually created for, because so many groups, I mean, outside groups, community groups, wanted to use the center. I mean, we were open from 8 o'clock at night. 8 o'clock in the morning till some nights I didn't get home to midnight. Some nights I felt like, well, maybe I just should go back here at my desk and put my head down because I got to open up in the morning. But again, as Reggie talked about before, just a raw sacrifice, because it didn't matter. Like I said, I was there when they did the proposal, and then I was off trying to, lay the foundation for my career and everything. And then when Doc came back, I was so honored that I was tapped, to pick up the torch from all these brothers and sisters that, we've heard from already, and carry the torch into glory. I was there at the center doing what we needed to do. So no, we didn't have the kitchen. We didn't have the multiple rooms, but we took what we had, and boy, we programmed the life out of that place. We wore out the carpet, We
But you could never use red punch. Doc didn't let us use red punch.
Yeah, 2 years. Yeah, you could. Well, those first years,
no red punch.
Yeah, but those first years, we learned a lot. We learned a lot about, facility management, and what it takes, so from the paint on the walls, I mean, we wore the paint off. We wore the carpet out in 2 years, literally, real talk. Yeah, so again, we took lemons and we made lemonade, and it was sweet.
Good. I mean, because we're coming up, we got about 15, 20 minutes. There's no way we can get everything in. So yeah, Brother Reggie, we need to do like The Last Dance. We need like a 6-part documentary. I'm all for it. So staff at the Culture Center, get ready. And if Doc was still there, you all would be doing it. So, he will call you up at 10 o'clock at night and say he wanted it by 8 o'clock in the morning, and we make it happen. So again, kind of wrapping up a little bit. So we're in the time of where diversity is the buzz, right? We're noticing that many of our Black culture centers are now becoming multicultural centers. So the question for you all, again, being so instrumental in the beginning, how do we protect the purpose and the foundation of the cultural center and ensure it does not get folded under the umbrella of a multicultural center?
I think hey, this is Steve. I apologize for being late, Stacy, but I think part of it is, how you doing? It's going to be really our engagement as alumni, and now for me as faculty, that we show that we are supporting, what the purpose is, to hold hold accountable, because I understand the shift and the desire to make it to dilute everything, right? And we have to really be able to say, hey, look, as alumni, this is what we support, this is what we want, and to really make sure that that representation is maintained.
If I could add on to that, I think that there's a couple things that came out that we talked about today that continue to be critically important. We talked earlier about coalitions and how, broad support across different entities kind of help make things happen. And then, we talk about diversity, but there's also kind of inclusion as well, and making sure that, the one of the drivers was, as the university continues to struggle with having diversity on campus, particularly African-American students represented on campus, the role and the value of this center needs to be continuously articulated, continuously held up, and providing an environment that African-American students feel included, that it is by and far the biggest entity on campus that delivers that. And by taking away, we can be able to stay strategic, right? That just cuts at the heels of anything the university might want to say around diversity or inclusive intentions, if you're going to take away what's proven to be one of the most valuable entity towards that for African-American students. So, I think that broadly, value, we can't just rest on laurels. And I think, first of all, I would say that the Cultural Center, it's all the stories we've heard. When I've had a chance to come back to go to it way exceeded any expectation I know I personally had when the idea first got started. So it's blown me away, particularly when I've heard underclassmen at some previous events talk about what it meant to them. It just brought me to tears that it was that powerful. And so I think the value we as leaders and students who are there now need to be able to articulate and really message what's the value. And when people understand the value and that it's part of the strategy of the university of making sure the diverse population, African-American students in particular, feel included, then that's what you need to do. That's what we need to do so it doesn't morph into something other than what is intended, because what it is and what it was really intended to be is incredibly valuable. And there should be never any question or any reason. And so we can't let other people determine what that narrative is about what the value of the center is. We collectively need to continue to always put out and let others know, here is what the value is. It continues to be both from alumni, faculty, and the students. And what I've heard from undergraduate students over the years is impeccable. The value is astronomical. And I think we need to make sure we just lead in that messaging and let it build on to what's next. And I talk about maintaining what it is, what's next. Like, this has been a long growth. What's next? That's the conversation. Lead the conversation to what's next, as opposed to hang on to what we got.
I'm gonna put it on the students. Student activism is really what's going to be the driving force. And I agree with Steve. Alumni can always bring pressure, and faculty, but students carry the burden of their own fight. And if the center is to thrive and to stay what the ancestors already committed it to be, it's going to be on the students to utilize the center, the students to know their history, to get into the intelligentsia of their history, to create maybe a student newsletter, or find what's on campus that's meaningful for them, so that they can learn how to become leaders and push their own struggle and utilize the center to do that. And if the students if it lapses, it won't be because of alumni or faculty. It's going to be always because of students. Now, we need alumni to help shape and mold and advise those students, but it is the student who is central to the activism of the Cultural Center. Other than that, it's just the building, a pretty building. So
I'd have to agree with Reggie. The history that this was birthed from a student movement that became reality and it had a supporting cast is real. It's real talk. And you have a student fee that you or your parents, however you you fund college. And so you have to stand up for your money. And the programming never goes away because there's a need there. There's a gap. There's a gap in terms of how you feel about yourself, how you relax with your fellow classmates. And the other thing is that you are educating yourself. You're teaching yourself life lessons while you're in college. So these students have to grab the ball. They have the one that ask us to come back on more than one occasion and have the courage. I don't want another white student calling me to ask for money for the University of Cincinnati. It doesn't have to happen. And it's happened many times and I still stroke a check. But I am waiting for a day for an African-American person from Foundation or one of the colleges to call me and ask me for money. And it should be somebody who's active in the United Black Association, or I believe there's a name change. It's not called that anymore. But alumni are key, but the students have to drive this thing, just like Reggie said.
I want to say this as an alum, not as a person who worked at the University of Cincinnati for 48 years and 6 months. I have a little difference in terms of what Reggie and Byron are saying, but that is what was great about bringing the Cultural Center together. We didn't always agree. I think more than ever, alum are needed. Some of these battles are just too much to expect that what's expected of students. You got to understand, a lot of our students now, they'd rather become the student government president than the UBA president. So, but let's even just forget that. Reality is, this is a promise. The University of Cincinnati has made a promise. It's not unclear what it is. It's not multicultural. We got a multicultural center. It's called Ethnic Programs and Services. The director's on here now. We are not going to be bamboozled or duped by any kind of change like that. And that's going to mean we got to roll back. Whatever way we roll back, with our money, with our voices, whatever. You know, this is a promise. This is about our community, years of people not being allowed at the University of Cincinnati, not being able to room with people who look like them, being called names, being told they wasn't supposed to be there. The audacity, I wish somebody would try to take away the African American Cultural and Resource Center. The only place I really differed, I'm gonna show you, I couldn't win everything. I wanted to call Black Culture Center. I wish you would ask that question, Stacy. How did it really get its name? Because we had to vote on that. But I didn't always win. But you don't have to always win to win. So the question that you asked, Stacy, Dr. Downing, is a dangerous one. Hopefully our University of Cincinnati, our beloved university, who said that they understood that we had no place to gather, who said that they understood that the blood, sweat, and tears that students and community people have shed to make that university what it is, better not even try it.
Yeah, I agree with
change
you,
is not better change, then don't even try it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Doc.
And can I say, because we mentioned a lot of the men that were involved, and I would be remiss not to mention people like Marjorie Parham, because just as Dr. Owens was in those rooms with us, Marjorie Parham was in that room with us, and she was very clear about the role that women, because we can't dismiss the women.
That's right.
The role that women played in this movement. She told us how to dress. She told us when to speak. She told us that we needed to control communications, because she was over the Cincinnati Herald at the time.
Right.
So she told us, we forget about the news record calling us jungle bunnies. And she said, wait a minute, now if you're going to ask for the cultural center, make sure you talk about how you control communications. Make sure you understand when Reggie and Brad and Byron and those guys are out in front, what the women need to be doing in the back to make sure that they have everything organized. Because we spent a lot of time, like people were out there talking about safety issues, because we had threats, we had physical threats. They spent a lot of time out there making sure we were safe while we were in there trying to keep the programs and stuff together to make sure people understood the vision of what this needed to look like. And to Byron's point, the reason why the research piece, and I know you guys want to push that off, the reason why today that still kind of pushes a gut with a lot of us who was there at the time is because in order for people to continue to learn, this conversation is cyclical. You know, this conversation happened in '68 with Tillery. It happened with Harlan. It happened with Byron, or with Reggie. It happened with Byron, and it's happening now. So it doesn't have to be one side versus the other. I think what we're getting to the point of, people have to have a communication channel and a strategy about, okay, here's the plan. Where is the plan going now? Because some of us, I mean, and again, I now teach part-time at UC. I love my alum, my alma mater, but at the point, where are we going with where the plan was supposed to be? Because for some of us, that plan wasn't realized. When I went up there a couple of years ago, I hadn't been up there for almost 30 years. I was upset to see that a lot of the things that we thought we were going to get, statistical data, don't tell us we got 7% enrollment rates. Don't tell us that CPS students drop out, and we still don't have any data to say why those things are happening. Dr. Abercrombie did his job. He did his job. He mentored all of us, but he couldn't do the job that we needed to support what he was doing, which was tell us the data. Tell us the data, tell us why it's happening, what the root causes are, cause and effect, and then let's talk about strategies to get these students up there and graduating, because we're still losing students. Mm-hmm. And so I would say we would be remiss not to have that conversation.
Absolutely.
That is, again,
that's a very complex, systematic question or conversation to have. I can tell you, being blessed and having an opportunity, I've said this to Blue and others, you know, as an educational consultant working in CPS and now as a school counselor, we can have that conversation. What's happening with our young brothers and sisters? You know, I'll be honest with you all. What is even happening with the young people? You know, I got young children, you know, like I said, I got started late. So my daughter's 23. I have a son that's 20, you know, and they think different. They think different. Their priorities are different. You know, so just like Byron went and dug out the archives, I got archives. You know, I got some of Doc's books that he loaned me. They still on loan, Doc. I got them. Just let me know when you want them back. So, but getting my children to read them and to dig deep into what we was digging deep into is different. So, you know, Cassandra, I agree with you. I think, you know, Blue, maybe we need to come back together on the yard and we need to sit and we need to really talk and strategize so that that conversation don't ever happen. Please don't Blue, I know you love me. Don't let them ever start talking about taking away the culture center. I'm seriously, don't do that to me, because I will, Lord Jesus, I'll be up there. I tell you.
I hear you.
Please don't let them do that, because I'll be one of them brothers that will take a bullet.
Because
that's my lifeline. Well, it won't come to that.
Right.
And all I can say right now is I hear you and I hear the conversation. Shonda, I can let you know we do have the data. I'm happy to share that information. We've built some systems out where we can track folks to see when they're coming in, how they're coming in, what their profile looks like, especially from a CPS perspective.
Right.
I've designed the system, so I know what it does. So I'm happy to have those conversations in terms of where we are, but also where we need to go and what we can do to support our students, not only getting them into the university, but getting them across the stage.
Amen.
And into whatever their chosen profession will be.
And you know, the Culture Center did birth some things, because when I can't help but be proud to look at Dr. Downing and Dr. Marshall, who were students. You know, right. I ran track with Dr. Downing's brother, and I don't know that you have a Dr. Bluzette or a Dr. Downing without the Culture Center, without Doc taking these students in and mentoring them.
Terry Hurdle too.
Because you had the Culture Center and you put Bluzette in a position of learning how to be a leader, learning what it's going to take to be on a professional level, and then willing to sacrifice and compromise those things to move up. The Cultural Center birthed, and we talk about women, we would be remiss about Dr. Linda Bates Parker. It was Linda Bates Parker who birthed the African American male boot camp, and which she hired me to coordinate. That boot camp, we would take young African American boys and bring them into the center where they would meet with Doc, and they were able to sit at the round table. They were able to see physically their culture and see other African American students. And so these boys were 12 to 18. From there, the state of Ohio asked me and Brother Brian Frazier, God bless him, who's no longer with us, and William to write a curriculum. So a lot of stuff, because the Culture Center was there to help institutionalize the heritage of UC African American students, it allowed a lot of other things to be birthed and come forward. And so I understand Shonda is totally correct, and I just trying to make sure that when we go out, we also go out on a positive note as well. And give honor to those who are, because Linda Bates Parker was the most strategic African sister on the yard.
Yes, sir.
Bar none. And you could put your mouth. Dr. Bates Parker hired me on the spot to be her secretary, put money in my pocket. Doc gave me a check for $2,000 when I was about to get kicked out of school because I couldn't come up with the money. That is what the Cultural Center provides from those type of individuals. And so we need to make sure that it stays what it is meant to be. And
hey, Stacy.
That's me.
Stacy, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
Hey, listen, I want to comment on two things. One, what Dr. Persigian said, and what Doc said. Historically, on all these campuses, whatever's going on in the larger society is going to be sparked on the campus. That's a fact. And I think that today we have a perfect opportunity to take advantage of that. Now, let's be clear. The last phase of the Culture Center was sparked by students again. Okay? But I'm going to go back to something that Reggie said. When we strategize to build a united front among the students, what we need now is united front with the students and community. So what we need now is united front with the alumni, the students on campus. And I don't know whether or not you all know this or not, but this a couple of months ago, the UC Faculty Senate passed a resolution asking UC to deal with racism. The UC Faculty Senate that is 98% white. So we need to be clear, and we talk about building coalitions. The UC Faculty Senate. So I think it's a perfect opportunity, given the current atmosphere in the country as a whole, to build that united front. And Blue is right. Hey, when you look at the data, I'm sorry. Oh, my battery. Oh, my battery's going low. But I think that going back to what Dr. Persigian said, you know, all the time that the larger society has an impact on the larger society. The campus sits in the community. I think a lot of times people try to separate the campus from the community, but the campus is inside of the community. And like Doc said, it's time for, and it was a very strategic mistake for African American Studies not to take the Cultural Center. Very strategic mistake. But just to give you a data point, under the leadership of the late Terry Kershaw, I know a lot of you all know this, Africana Studies a few years ago had more faculty than the sociology department. They also had a PhD program that had went all the way up to the last moment and for some reason was canceled. It had outside review and everything. Everything. So I think the students are continuing to do their part, but I think the alumni And also the quote affinity groups on campus. And I told this me and Blue had lunch this past spring at Mick and Mac. Affinity groups are all right, but they have to be there for a purpose. And if we're not at the table, having affinity groups just to have them ain't gonna work. So it's time to build that united front, the affinity groups, the alumni, and the students on campus, and then we can protect and grow what we started.
What's an affinity group?
The African American faculty group, the Black male
It's like an
staff group,
employee resource group based off
right?
of demographic or
The
identity.
Black women's group, the Black women's group. You know, it's good to have these organizations, but they need to be at the table.
I'm the president of the African American Black Male Staff Employee Resource Group at UC. Just newly elected president in September. So I have another role at UC. I was actually going to email that information to you all.
Oh, Arthur, we knew you was getting on Arthur. So again, love the conversation. And I know, EQ, you was gonna say something?
Yeah, I'm speaking as the 4A chair right now, family. And one of the things that I do keep hearing is alumni. And one of the main objectives was engagement when I talked to Justin and I took this role. So for me, and I will, respectfully say elders, or we'll just say alumni, what can I do as chair that we can bring together these gaps? Because one of the things that I've seen throughout, my years of being an alumni at UC, you have, if we call it, I would call it like sectors of alumni at UC. You have your older group, you have your middle group, and then you have your young group. And I know that just by having events at UC Homecoming. What can we do collectively, not just on a homecoming front, but really engagement, bringing everybody together at the table? Because right now I'm looking at my Zoom, I'm seeing dollar signs, I'm seeing people with degrees, I'm seeing people who give back both financially and their time. But this really wasn't done, and I'm only saying this because of what I've seen, and I'm not taking nothing away what was done in the past. But collectively going forward, what can we do to bring everything to the table? There's programs that alumni did not know about, that when I posted on social media, people were in awe of things that existed or did not exist. That the fund through the AR, when we're speaking about AACRC right now, it's a fund that you just spoke about, Reggie, in regards to getting money. Like, alumni might not want to, let's be honest, there's Black alumni who don't want to give money back to UC, but they'll give to the African American Resource Center in a heartbeat. But we have to know about this. And so my job as 4As, I want to make sure I engage enough alumni to be able to financially help out, but also, just their time, because you have alumni that want to give their time and effort if they can't give financially. But we have to get the word out, but we need to engage as well. So, that's my piece. And I'm just saying that as a new 4A chair, that's my vision, is I want to utilize this COVID time where we can't really meet in person, but really take a step back. What were the pluses? What were the minuses that has been done over the years? Analyze that. And then for 2021, hopefully with all the vaccines and everything, we can do better. So that's kind of my strategic goal. But my email, I can send my information out, but whatever I can do as 4A chair to engage alumni, get people involved, that is my goal for this year. Because next year my plan is to implement all strategies. This year, we sometimes just got to step back and reorganize. Mm-hmm. But next year is all about implementation. So like I said, I have to drop soon, family, but that is my pitch. That is what I want to do. Arthur, as you all know, Arthur makes sure he will blow you up and communicating to you at all costs. And I have been on a couple of Zoom meetings with him already. And I just want to know everything that needs to be understood from a UC alumni standpoint. And that's you, Bluzak. You have the numbers, you're in a different role. But what you have, the knowledge you have, the data you have, the information you have is what Black alumni want to know and they need to know, because that's how they get engaged. That's how they cut checks. That's how they step on campus and get involved. So we need to be transparent. I'm trying to figure out a way to be even more transparent by getting this information out to Black alumni. If it's a newsletter that we're already doing, a mail or whatever it is, but this information that we all have, that we talk about, needs to be out there in the open for all alumni, Black alumni to have. And then that's how we'll get engaged. That's how we'll become more of a powerhouse, because I mean, we have so much alumni, Black alumni, who just want to be involved, and like I said, who are successful, but they don't have the information, and some just don't know, and you can't help what you don't know. So again, I'm rambling, but that's my pitch, because I'm passionate. You know, as you all know, I've been ripping and running around UC, throwing parties for UC, and that was my way of getting people back to UC. And, you know, I was giving money back to 4A when we were throwing parties, but that's because I love the passion that I had. And, you know, at the end of the day, I came there as a young boy and graduated as a man. And that was all because of UC and Doc and Stacy and William and all these elders that were there that helped me out when I had questions. And I passed the information on to other young students, but I want us collectively to give back as well.
So can you put your information in the chat so everyone will have it, your email address? Yeah. So again, we could go on and on. This has been some good stuff. I mean, I don't even know how to just end it, you know? So again, I think I appreciate everyone who took the time to come on this call. You know, I think when I came to UC in '92, the center was brand new, right? Didn't even feel brand new. It felt like we was in there already using it. And again, I could speak for hours about, you know, how the center shaped me. You know, I was a true center kid, right? Those late night hours, as William said, you know, we're in there doing the work. So, you know, the irony for me is that I had the opportunity to work there professionally as well. So again, I'm being molded, hanging out, then boom, I'm a program coordinator, right? That was my take my step into the professional world. And so it's just giving me the chance again to pay it forward, you know, being connected to the Alumni Association when we started, you know, 4A 10, 12, 13 years ago. So again, having the opportunities that I've had based on, you know, being a cultural center kid, the center being there and doing what it continues to do. So again, I know if I ask another question, we're going to be here another hour or two. So again, thank you all. Dr. Hurdle, if there's a final question, a final comment that you may have. If not, I'll pass it back to Eric. Again, panelists, you are fantastic. I don't think we can talk enough about the history, how we got to this point. I think as the year-long celebration continues, we can talk about the current state and again, how we're going to look ahead. We've gotten some ideas about that. So again, it's a lot of people on the call that, you know, have had some impact. Again, shout out to everybody for joining. It was good being here with everyone. So again, Eric Watford, Brittany, we'll turn it back to you all.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Hurdle and Dr. Downing. Thanks to the panelists and to everyone who attended tonight. Just a couple of quick notes. If you would, we're dropping a link into the chat. So please fill out the short survey. And a lot of the conversations were hitting on some areas that we are definitely planning on programming throughout 2021, leading up to the African American Cultural Resource Center's anniversary. So get on our site. I know you talked about Black student activism, and there is a Black student activism forum in Black History Month sometime in February. I don't have the date right at the top of my fingertips, but check our website. And number two, I'm putting together a steering committee who is going to help me program all of these great events. So if you're interested in serving on a steering committee, anniversary steering committee, please drop your email in the chat. Lastly, we are going to end with paying reverence to our AACRC tradition. And we're going to end with a ceremonial charge from Dr. P. Eric Abercrombie.
Oh, the Kente, yes.
First of all, it's been a great night. I want to call two names that I didn't call. Tony Jackson, who really was one of the founders of the United Black Student Association. And I want to call the name Denise Waddington. And I want to call her for two reasons. She was the first, along with William, she was the first program coordinator in the Cultural Center. And also, she is the person who started Taimba. And so I hope, Eric, what happens is you have the programs later that, you know, you'll be able to do them in phases. The next one we'll talk about, okay, what's happened in the Culture Center? What's it? Tonight dealt with history. And that's the other thing. All of you that said Eric Watford don't have nothing together, you got to give him a hand because he's delivered one of the best programs in UC history tonight with this program. So with that, in the spirit of Harambe, and if everybody just give me your fist, everybody just give me your fist and just keep it up there. In the spirit of Harambe, in the spirit of Umoja, unity, in the spirit of Kujachaja, self-determination, in the spirit of Ujima, collective worker responsibility, in the spirit of Ujama, collective economics, in the spirit of Kuamba, creativity, in the spirit of Nia, purpose, in the spirit of Imani, faith. I'd like to charge you with this. 4 things we need to be about: gratitude, giving, protection, and vigilance. Gratitude. We should be grateful that we've had our center as long as we've had it. We should be grateful of all that it has accomplished. And giving, as my dear brother said, we should be about also giving resource. If we wanted to continue, we must give to it. But the last 2, we must be vigilant. We must stay vigilant regarding our African-American Culture and Resource Center. And last but not least, we must stay protective. We must value what our center's about. So if you go up with your fists, we're gonna do 7 of them. We're gonna come down. When I pull down, y'all holler Harambe. Harambe. Harambe.
Harambe.
Harambe.
Harambe.
Harambe.
Harambe.
Harambe.
Harambe.
Harambe.
Harambe.
Harambe. Let's pull together.
Amen. That's all right.
Next slide.